Hi, I'm Joe Zimmerman, and today I'm here to talk about our new digital aerobic panel. The digital aerobic panel controls a simplex pump in a 120 volt application, and it also controls your compressor and monitors your alarm conditions, such as your high water alarm and compressor fail alarm. And what we're doing with the compressor fail alarm is we're monitoring the current instead of monitoring pressure from an air hose. As we know, those don't always work the best. So what we want to do is monitor the compressor through the digital display, and we're going to go over the programming and the wiring on that later. So these are the installation instructions that come with the digital aerobic panel, and the field wiring diagram is in this box right here. And what we're showing is there's two circuit breakers. One is for your pump and aerator. The other circuit breaker is for your control and alarm, and you will hook L1 for the pump and aerator to one of the breakers, and then L1 to the control alarm to the other breaker. And for the in-feed, that's where you'd hook both neutrals for the incoming power for both the pump, aerator, and control and alarm. The next things would be hooking up to your pump and aerator that's going out to the tank. So we would hook the L1 pump lead to the third terminal block over, the aerator L1 lead to the fourth one over, and then they also share a neutral. This is the load neutral, so both the pump and the aerator would share that neutral. And then we hook up the float switches, so you have the pump float, which would activate as long as your timer setting is enabled. There are 4 timer settings that we'll be going through. So as long as the time is set and the float is up, the pump will run. If the float is up and the time setting is not ready yet, then nothing will happen unless you hook up a timer override float, and that's optional. So if there is too much water in the tank, there's this optional timer override float that will demand dose it out into the field. And then the last hookup would be your high water alarm float, and that would hook up here. So the corresponding schematic to the parts on the panel, you'd see there's a 20 amp breaker for your pump and aerator. There's a 15 amp breaker for your alarm, and you hook your L1s for each of these up to the bottom of these breakers. Behind here, it's hard to see, there's a ground lug. That's where all your grounds go. And then everything is labeled real nice on the terminal block. So here's where your in-feed neutral will go. So that's your incoming neutral for both the pump, aerator, and alarm. And the next ones are for your pump and your aerator. So you'd hook your L1 hot leg of your pump going out to the tank here, and your neutral would go to the load side. Same thing with the aerator. You'd hook your L1 black wire of the aerator here, and then the neutral would be shared with the pump. And then we have the 3 float switches. So this would be the pump float switch. It's labeled here. There's a pump run indicator light as well when that switch is up and running. The override float would hook here, and then that also has a indicator light. And then your high water alarm would hook here, and obviously the beacon would be your indicator light. There's also on the side a test silent switch. Now this is an NEMA 4X box, so it's weatherproof. So when the alarm is going off, you can press this and it will silence. But if the alarm is not going off, you can press this and it will test. You get the horn and the light. So as you can see, we have the float switches hooked up. I got my pump float, my override float, and my alarm float hooked up on the terminal block. We also have power for the pump, the aerator, and the alarm going. So my digital display is lit up. Just to demonstrate the floats, when the pump float goes up, and right now it's about 11:30 a.m. So it's showing my time of day here, but the timer is set for midnight to 6 a.m. So the pump's not allowed to run. Even though the float's up, you'll illuminate the status indicator, but the pump run light is not on until time of day reaches midnight. If in the case where you have a timer override float hooked up and it's not yet midnight, when that float goes up, meaning there's a overusage of water, then that will demand dose the pump. So now you can see our pump run indicator is illuminated, and also the float status indicator for the override is illuminated. So when that float drops down, it'll just go back to the standby mode, waiting for midnight. And beyond that, we have the high water alarm float, and that's independent. Now I can silence it, and the light will stay on until the condition is remedied. The float would have to go back down in order to reset it. So we have the power hooked up on this side, the float's hooked up on that side, and I will go through the display. So right now it's showing time of day is 11:35 a.m. It's also showing me my aerator running amps. So right now we have a test motor and we're running at 4 amps with that. And then it's showing that the pump is off here. This is my time of day, and this is my timer setting. Now we have 4 timer settings, and we're only using 1 in this case. So there's a dial with a wheel, and so we can go through the different screens. So this is where you'd set your clock, and to simply set that, you just push in on the wheel, and you dial indicator, and you can move it back and forth depending on your time of day. And you can use 24-hour or regular time clock as well. And once you have that set, you just push in again, and it goes back to the home screen. The next screen would be your timer settings, and right now we have it set for midnight to 6 a.m. And to set that, again, you just push in on the dial, and it'll say T1 for timer 1 to start, and you can program that however you want. In this case, we're gonna leave it at midnight, which is to a 24-hour time clock, and then I can go to 6 a.m. and you push it again to lock it in. So I have timer 1 set, and there's timer 2, timer 3, and timer 4 if you wanted to have different time settings within that 24-hour window. You can also set the aerator amperage. Right now I have it set at 5 amp, 0.5 amp. If I want to increase or reduce that, I can simply turn the dial and then push it in again to lock that in. Go back to the aerator set. So right now I'm set for 1 amp. If I'm not using an aerator, I can simply go and zero it out and then set it. So now the aerator alarm wouldn't go off in that case. So I'll go back to the aerator and set that back to a 0.5 amp. And if I want to test that, I'm going to shut off the incoming power. So now you can see it's a flashing beacon telling me that there's an aerator problem, and you can see on the screen that there's 0 amps. Now I'm going to turn the aerator back on, and the alarm will go off. And it's something to note, if it's a solid beacon, that means it's your high water alarm. So that's the difference between those 2 alarms. So this screen, the next one past the aerator amp set, is your information telling you that this is telling me that the aerator has run 32 minutes and 0 hours, and if I push in the wheel again, it's telling me that there was 3 cycles. So it's telling me it cycled on and off 3 times, and the run time. And it does the same for the pump. It's telling me that the water pump has run 1 minute and 0 hours, and if I push it in, it'll say that there's been 14 cycles. So that's good for preventative maintenance. Beyond that, you go back to your home screen. If you ever get lost, you can always push the escape button and it'll bring you back to the home screen. There's also a pump test button you can push in if you want to test the pump if you're in the field, rather than running jumper wires and things like that. It's a nice way to test your pump feature. The digital aerobic panel also has a super capacitor in it, so if you do lose power, like I've disconnected everything. If you lose power, it'll maintain your program settings for several days. We also have labeling in here that shows you your field wiring instructions as well as some programming instructions. The programming instructions are in the installation guide, but if you don't have that, there's also kind of a quick guide here to show you how to program such things as the clock and the timer settings. All of our panels also have a ratings label, so something to do would be if you do have some issues in the field and you need to call tech support, it's a good idea to take a picture of this so we know when it was manufactured and exactly what panel you have. So those are good things to have before you give us a call. And also, this is in a NEMA 4X box with a latch. So when you latch it, it'll have a NEMA 4X seal. Also, there's a tamper-proof screw that is available. It comes with it. That goes here. That's just to keep somebody from coming by and opening it without tools. You can also add a paddle lock if you want. And the panels, the enclosure is designed with features so you can mount it easily on a wall. There's tabs on the top and bottom for easy mounting it. The breakers, I should mention too, for the pump and the aerator is a combined total of 18 amps max. So 15. If you had a 15 amp pump, you wouldn't want to have more than a 3 amp aerator, but you have 18 amps to play with. And then the alarm breaker, control alarm breaker, we set at max of 6 amps. And this is a 8x6x4 thermoplastic enclosure.